Good morning. Our Sunday school lesson for June 20th is a continuation of our Joseph stories. This time, it'll deal with interpretations of some dreams in Egypt. You know, sometime each of us have probably done something for someone, and the person moves on with his or her life, and we don't hear from them again. Perhaps sometimes the shoe's on the other foot, and someone helped us out along the way, and we merely accepted the help without showing the appreciation that we should. Maybe it was a recommendation for a job, a suggestion for an easier way to do something, or the secret of winning the lottery. Well, then caught up in the moment after the assist, we neglect to show our thanks. A few weeks ago, I received a note from a former student thanking me for the confidence I had in her abilities and shoring up the insecurities that she was feeling as she was about to begin her college career. She's now an educator and had assigned her students to write a thank you note to a teacher who had inspired them. She said the assignment made her realize that she needed to follow the same task that she had assigned the students. It had been over 25 years, and I think that the lapsed time made me appreciate the letter even more. It also reminded me of unsaid thank yous that I may have neglected. But perhaps my greatest neglect is not thanking God enough for all the blessings that I've received. I told the teacher that the greatest thanks she could offer me was to continue to instill in her students a confidence in themselves and a desire to show their appreciation of others along the way. Joseph, even as a prisoner, was able to help others. The jailer put him in charge of seeing to the needs of the other prisoners, and he accepted the responsibility and showed that he was worthy of trust. When the king's cupbearer and baker are jailed, Joseph could sense their distress, and they confide in him. Both would have been very trusted servants of the Pharaoh, and the trust had been compromised. Their responsibility was to protect Pharaoh from the dangers of poison or tainted food, but something had happened to make him doubt their loyalty, and now they feared for their lives. Both had dreams involving numbers, position, wordplay, and change. Joseph is able to tell the cupbearer that his dream indicates that he will soon be restored to his position, but the baker's dream will lead to execution. In a short time, the truth of both dreams is realized, and as the cupbearer is released, Joseph asks him to speak well of him if the possibility arises. Well, 2 years pass, and the cupbearer seems to have forgotten him. But some dreams begin to trouble Pharaoh. I want to read our scripture passage for today, Genesis 41, 1 through 16, and then 25 through 32. 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing near the Nile. In front of him, 7 healthy-looking fatted cows climbed up out of the Nile and grazed on the reeds. Just then, 7 other cows, terrible-looking and scrawny, climbed up out of the Nile after them and stood beside them on the bank of the Nile. The terrible-looking, scrawny cows devoured the 7 healthy-looking, fatted cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He went back to sleep and had a second dream, in which 7 ears of grain, full and healthy, grew on a single stalk. Just then, 7 ears of grain, scrawny and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them, and the scrawny ears swallowed up the full and well-formed ones. Then Pharaoh woke up and realized it was a dream. In the morning, he was disturbed and summoned all of Egypt's religious experts and all of its advisors. Pharaoh described his dreams to them, but they could not interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief wine steward spoke to Pharaoh. Today, I've just remembered my mistake. Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker under arrest with the commander of the royal guard. We both dreamed one night, he and I, and each of our dreams had its own interpretation. A young Hebrew man, a servant of the commander of the royal guard, was with us. We described our dreams to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us, giving us an interpretation for each dream. His interpretations came true exactly. Pharaoh restored me to my position, but hanged him. So Pharaoh summoned Joseph, and they quickly brought him from the dungeon. He shaved, changed clothes, and appeared before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, but no one could interpret it. Then I heard that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it's not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable response. Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh has actually had one dream. God has announced to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy ears of grain are 7 years. It's actually one dream. The 7 thin and frail cows climbing up after them are 7 years. The 7 thin ears of grain scorched by the east wind are 7 years of famine. It's just as I told Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are now coming throughout the entire land of Egypt. After them, 7 years of famine will appear, and all of the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will devastate the land. No one will remember the abundance in the land because the famine that follows will be so severe. The dream occurred to Pharaoh twice because God has determined to do it, and God will make it happen soon. It had been 13 years after Joseph shared the dreams that angered his brothers when Pharaoh's dreams took place. In verses 1 through 7, Pharaoh's dreams are described. The 7 fat cows that come up from the Nile grazing on the reeds. 7 scrawny cows join them and then devour the healthy cows. Then in a second dream, 7 ears of grain, full and healthy, share a single stalk, and 7 scrawny ears, scorched by sun and wind, sprout after them and swallow up the healthy and full ones. Pharaoh summons all of Egypt's religious experts and his advisors, but they could offer no clue about interpreting the dreams. Then the chief wine steward suddenly remembered his failed promise and the man who had given him hope, and he explained the meaning of his dream. He recalled Joseph's accuracy in interpreting his dreams, as well as the dream of the baker. Pharaoh did not hesitate to send for Joseph. He was immediately made presentable for a meeting with Pharaoh, properly clothed and shaved, probably his face and head. Pharaoh tells Joseph why he's been summoned and relates that he has heard of Joseph's ability to interpret dreams. Joseph quickly informs him that the ability was beyond him. He was no expert interpreter. But he added that God was instrumental in sending dreams and empowering people to derive their meaning, giving the person a sense of peace by accepting the truths the dreams conveyed. With the retelling of the dreams, Pharaoh seems to realize that it is the same message that's being conveyed, and Joseph confirms that is the case. It was actually one dream reinforced by a different set of images. The number 7, the cows and the grain, Joseph explained, is 7 years. Emaciated cows and grain shriveled by the east wind represent 7 years of famine, which follow the 7 years of abundance. Joseph further emphasized that God had shared the information with Pharaoh to give him time to act on it. Egypt was about to experience 7 years of tremendous abundance, but afterwards there would be extreme famine. The frail cows that swallowed up the healthy cows did not become healthy. Their condition was so severe, no one would be able to remember what the healthy cows had looked like. The famine that would hit Egypt would make people forget the time of plenty. It was imperative to prepare for the worst. So Joseph offered Pharaoh some unexpected advice. Pharaoh could have been offended by such a brazen act, but he realized that Joseph's words were wise and were not offered as criticism. In fact, he was so impressed by Joseph that he recognized his intelligence and immediately trusted him. He put Joseph in charge of his kingdom and gave him all the symbols associated with such authority: a signet ring, linen clothes, a gold necklace, an ornate chariot, and even a celebratory parade. In verses 44 through 45, we find the full extent of Joseph's powers were publicly announced, and Joseph was given an Egyptian name, possibly a name that was a title that could be used in place of a mere name. And he gave him a wife of appropriate social standing. So Joseph was now ready to assume control of the land of Egypt. Joseph was now 30 years old, had been in Egypt nearly half his life. He had experienced setbacks and reversals of fortune. He could have wallowed in pity, become embittered, and given up hope. But his positive temperament, wisdom, and ability enabled him to be successful and to become a divine blessing for others. He did not merely sit back and enjoy being cast into the lap of luxury. He traveled the land, learning more about it and getting to know the people. He incorporated the use of vast storage processes and implemented the building of facilities to store the amassed grain that was beyond measuring. He was also blessed in this time with 2 healthy sons. In verses 53 through 57, we're told that when the years of famine struck, the effects were blunted because of the enormity of Joseph's supplies. Not only did Egyptians come to Joseph for grain, so did people from all the lands around Egypt. And of course, that's how Joseph's brothers made their way to Egypt. Even in his darkest moments, Joseph was given opportunities to grow in his faith. Each time, Joseph was reduced to what would have once been considered demeaning status. He made the most of the situation and could feel God's presence with him. During those times, he was allowing himself to apply his talents, win the confidence of his supervisors, and help those around him. Let's think for a moment about what John Wesley considered would happen in the spiritual growth of a Christian. Even before one recognizes a relationship with God, God is already there, offering his grace and love. This Wesley labeled as prevenient grace, grace that is open to everyone, even if the person doesn't recognize it. Prevenient means to go before. It indicates that God goes before us to show what a life with God is like. Justifying grace comes as we recognize God's love for us. And he desires to walk with us as we turn to accept that love. We understand the sacrifice of his Son to save us. Then sanctifying grace takes place as we strive to reflect God's love through our interactions with others. I think that Joseph was probably between prevenience and justification when his brothers rose up against him and sent him to Egypt. But there, he began to trust God and allowed him to guide him through some dark, dark times. It would have been easy to set God aside when Pharaoh empowered him, but Joseph realized the ability to interpret dreams was in order to save Egypt, and the surrounding nations could not have done this without God's guidance. He didn't merely acknowledge God's role. He rolled up his sleeves and began to demonstrate it. He was moving toward sanctification, and it was time to forgive and find peace in his heart. May we pray. Dear God, we know that we do not deserve the love you offer us. We are thankful to you for your ongoing presence in our lives, and we ask that you enable us to demonstrate your love by helping others along our way. Amen.